Yo, what up, friends? The United States news of the week. And you know, we got to get into our Donald Trump news, our weekly Donald Trump updates, as we are wont to do on this program. But first, before we do get into that, the house where Donald Trump lives, the White House, on yesterday afternoon, the Secret Service shot an armed man in a confrontation near the White House. So what happened? First of all, great tip-offs and indications done here by law enforcement, as the U.S. Secret Service said that they actually received information about a suicidal individual traveling from D.C. to Indiana. To D.C. from Indiana. And they actually received that bolo from the North Manchester, Indiana Police Department, which sent it to the D.C. Metropolitan Police. They were on aware lookout. The armed man obviously had mental health issues and was trying to attempt suicide. You ask how you know that? Well, once the Secret Service came to him, asked him to drop his weapon. When he had his weapon pointed at himself, he ignored commands, turned around, and pointed the gun at the Secret Service. Well, that's a quick way to get your ass shot. And he surely did get shot. But again, salute to the law enforcement for being such collaborative there. I know I don't usually give them their props on this program, but they did a great job here in making sure to protect the White House and the president and all other inhabitants that may be there. That being said, a lot of people are upset at what is going on in the new White House administration, especially a lot of federal government workers. I keep saying this, about 75% of the people I know are from that area and have someone in their family, and even probably themselves. A lot of my friends, a lot of my family, government workers that are worried if their jobs are going to be there after all these layoffs and cuts are happening. And again, while I continue to say I agree with DOGE cutting government waste and efficiency, I do not agree with the chainsaw approach. I believe we need a scalpel approach, a more targeted niche approach, in order to protect the jobs of veterans, protect the jobs of the most important, protect the jobs of the nuclear engineers who have been fired and otherwise that had to be brought back, right? If we cut with more of a scalpel, if Elon isn't just going in and chopping everything to pieces like it's a damn horror movie, well, then maybe a lot of veterans wouldn't be losing their jobs. We'd have a lot more peace. There'd be a lot less worry, instead of trying to scare people with stupid 5 bullet points that they need to send you about their damn job like they're 2 years old. Granted, anybody should be able to do it. Yes, I understand the other side of it, but it's also stupid to just say, oh, you need to do this just to prove like you're working. Look, man, as I know, I worked for the government for 10 years. It is not the government workers themselves who are the fraud, waste, and abuse. It is contracts. It is supplies, it is resources, it's a lot of other things that I was about to mention that I can't mention, but things left in other countries, things left in other places, whatever it is. There's a lot more waste than just the workers themselves, and a lot of people who are innocent are losing their jobs to this. And the fact is that even though there was a mandate, as they like to call it, the GOP, the conservative side likes to call it for Donald Trump, they like to call it a mandate that he was given to change the country. That's fine if that's what he's trying to do, as long as it's helping the country. But there was no mandate whatsoever to alienate our allies, demolish our departments, and embolden our enemies. There just wasn't. And at every turn so far, those 3 things have been done by this administration. And I was in support of a lot of things, and I still am, of some of the things that this administration started to do. But then when you start to do those things like tariffs and then pause 2 days after you announce them every single time, 3 times in a row, it makes you look again like the boy who cried wolf. And it makes people who, like me, who actually support tariffs against China and North Korea and our enemies, it actually makes me look and go, well, hey, I supported you, and now you just, pausing everything. Now, granted, the pauses were against Mexico and Canada, who we should not be tariffing at all, considering they're our neighbors and we should be treating them much nicer than that. But if you did want to even tariff them, fine. But just know that it's going to start a trade war because they are just going to tariff back like they had. And now we have to not escalate, which again is fine if we're doing that with our enemies, but not cool when we're doing it with our allies, people that we actually need to protect us. Remember, they are still on our northern and southern border, which means if we alienate them, if we make them upset, they could surely let any kinds of terrorists they wanted into our country. More critical thinking, y'all. We talked about this last week. More critical thinking is needed by everyone. All of you watching this program, the government, everyone needs to think more critically about the things that we do. Tariffs against our enemies, awesome. Tariffs against our friends, probably not so cool. And it's also not cool when you just say you're doing it and then you pause them 2 days later. Again, it just does not make you look like you're keeping up on your word. And unfortunately, for President Donald Trump, a lot of the time, the majority of the time, he is, as the word of the day, as we talked about earlier, bluster, a lot of bravado. Speaking of banter, brawls, and bravado coming soon, myself, Clubber D, comedian Bajoan Malave, another special guest will be coming on hopefully this Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern, but watch out for that. We're going to talk about a lot of the pop culture issues going on, but I need to find one more person. I'm still have one person on the fence I'm trying to convince, so we'll see how that goes, but be on the lookout for that. But anyways, a lot of bravado. And while that's great to portray as a strong man, which he is, it also doesn't help if in the end nothing is actually done. So we'll see where this goes. We'll see if this actually works or if it craters the economy like some economists are actually talking about, as well as, the mass immigration, which, you know how partisan I am here. I am a centrist. I do not like either of the parties. I think they both suck. I think all politicians are liars, cheaters, and scums. Woo! Shout out my boy Francis Long. Prayers up. But so I keep things partisan on this program. The issue here is that when you take into these numbers that they like to compare, especially during the transitions from presidents to presidents, right? There's a lot of talk going on now. The left is saying, President Donald Trump said day one prices are going to go down, which anybody logically in their right mind knows that that's not even possible. But his whole base believed it and voted for him based off of that. The other side, the left, is decrying him for not being able to do it, even though, again, logically, no one can do that. It's not even possible. So it shouldn't have been believed in the first place. But those are just some of the examples of things that he talks about that are not able to be done, and then just make him look like he's just talking to talk. And a lot of times he does just like to talk just to hear himself talk. And he's a reality star. He's a businessman. He is now the president. But so you can't take that away from him. That's what he's good at, right? I can't say that I don't like hearing him talk because he makes me laugh. He always says some crazy shit that I end up laughing at. So more power to him for keeping me entertained, at least. But a lot of times you're going to alienate a lot of our allies. And so this comes down even further as Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick informed Canadian Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc that Trump believes many of the U.S.-Canadian agreements could be abandoned very easily. And Lutnick says that Trump is actually interested in abandoning a lot of these, including withdrawing the Canada from the Five Eyes intelligence sharing group. Now, I can't get any further into that, but just know the unclassified information on that is that the United States and 4 of their allies contribute to sharing intelligence information around the world. He's looking to dismantle that and possibly even dismantle the Great Lakes water agreements and re-examine the 1908 not the 1908 redrawing of the Canadian and U.S. border that cuts through Canada and parts of Minnesota, and also re-examining military cooperation between the North American Aerospace Defense Command. I can truly say, again, as a person who has worked in the government, as a person who has worked with a lot of Canadian allies in the government, they do a tremendous job and support us hands down wholeheartedly, and to do something like disband them from the intelligence agency or take any other of these acts is just making it worse for us. Shout out, Pops. Amen. Thank you. Yes, the spending spree at the end of the year. They always do it, and then they always, boy who cried wolf, oh, the government is going to shut down. The government is going to shut down. They make everybody worry, and then all of a sudden they push it back, as they did, and then they pushed it back another 90 days, all because Donald Trump just wanted to get credit for it. He didn't want Biden to get credit, which, by the way, going back to the numbers I mentioned earlier, I forgot about them, but now that I mentioned this, deportation, last month, Donald Trump deported 11,500 people. Joe Biden in his last month deported 12,500, so about 1,000 more. For all those saying that Trump is deporting that many people, he's really not. Now, there's not a lot of people crossing the border, which is a really good thing, down to its lowest levels. But if you were hoping that he was, which some of you were, not me, but if you were hoping that he was going to mass deport immigrants, he has not done so far. And they've not gotten close to the numbers they said they were going to do, the 1,000 a day or whatever. They haven't even gotten close to that. All right, but hopefully they gotten all the criminals out. That's all I care about. Get all the criminals out. All the other innocent, hardworking immigrants are fine to stay here with me. All because if your organization is efficient using their budget, they fear they will get cut next year if they don't fund it. That's true. Yep. End of year, using your all allocated funds and budgets, a lot of organizations will spend frivolously. What a great word for a Puerto Rican on a live TV show. Frivolously will they spend? And yeah, it's not good. That end of the year budget, if anything's left over, organizations should get more credit for that. Maybe they should be allowed a bigger budget next year with the proportion of that going back to the government to fight the debt, or some kind of situation like that. You know, I'm solutions oriented here, so I gave you a solution there. Maybe they could do that. Chaos, that is correct. I was actually watching, I believe it was Fox News the other day, and they were hyping how he loves to and thrives off of chaos. So, and they talked about the cabinet meeting the other day where he had Elon Musk and Secretary of State Marco Rubio yelling at each other. And he was just going back and forth, loving it. I don't know what that means. It looks like an angry French toast that my producer has sent to me. Thank you for producing the show. I appreciate the sound. It looks like a very angry piece of French toast. That's great. I'm gonna leave that up there. That looks really cool, actually. Moving on, Doge did remove 800 National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association workers. There we go. The NOAA, which oversees the National Weather Service, 8,000 employees were removed last week. Some of them were given one of those severances that he's been offering, the voluntary resignment. 500 people took the voluntary resignment for the rest of the year pay that they've been offering. But the problem is that they want to commercialize the NWS. Formerly, the aforementioned commercial secretary, Lutnick, has said that they are looking to actually commercialize the weather service. Project 2025, the policy blueprint that Donald Trump said he knew nothing about, but has followed about 75% of, which was produced by his own Heritage not his, but a Heritage Foundation that he has been received campaign donations from before, called for the breakup of the NOAA, accusing it of fostering climate alarmism. Now, I want to point out a couple things here as we talk about climate alarmism. The first one I was going to talk about at the end of the episode in the world news, but it fits so perfectly right now. I'm going to put it in here right now. So let me give you a couple notes about this. So they want to get rid of the NOAA, or not, they want to shrink down the NOAA. They want to get rid of the National Weather Service. They want to privatize weather forecasting like AccuWeather, others like that. But come to find out that a lot of private companies collect their weather data from the National Weather Service, including AccuWeather, who says that they have a role and that even sometimes they've predicted hurricanes, tornadoes before the AccuWeather could do it. And in that aspect, informed AccuWeather themselves that there was an emergency they needed to talk about on air. Also, Weather scientists say that NOAA's work on modeling for catastrophic events like hurricanes have made things more accurate in terms of forecasting. Also, critics of fully private forecasting are worried about not having free government forecasts for other poorer countries that we distribute weather information to, which is a great point because it could lead to information gaps in vulnerable areas around the world where you got to think about it. There's not just foreign citizens, but also expats, and other Americans that live overseas that we also need to worry about. Among the doubters, Trump's nominee to lead the NOAA, Neil Jacobs, who says that companies might not want to take on the legal liability of being the sole disaster alerter while limiting the NWS to a weather tracking function. I got to put my plug in before I die. Is meant to, what's happening here? While limiting the NWS meant to save taxpayer dollars. Get this, y'all. The NWS operations only cost $4 per each American per year. Are you telling me that it's not worth $4 per American per year to keep up the National Weather Service so we know when hurricanes, tornadoes, and the like are coming? I think it is logically. Again, we need to think critically about this, and the stakes are high. Natural disasters cost the United States $183 billion last year alone. And get this, remember when I said I had something from the world news? According to data from the NCEI, extreme weather events are becoming more frequent due to climate change. And for all those people that want to come on here and say climate change doesn't exist, as some of you have before, don't come to me with that BS. Climate change does exist. Again, I am not a fanatic. I ain't out here to tell you to change your ways, to recycle, whatever. I don't care. Keep living your life however you want. It's not going to bother us in our lifetime, but generations to come, it could very well affect. And the issue is that when we don't have the NWS, the NOAA, we are not able to better forecast and avoid the worst of natural disasters. Then, looking back to what I just said about the world news, come to find out that our human efforts in terms of combating climate change are actually helping to heal the ozone layer. Shout out, going back to MIT, we talked about them earlier with the Sports Sloan Analytics Conference at Massachusetts. The scientists at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, supported by NASA, have confirmed that the big hole in the ozone over Antarctica is actually shrinking. So the stuff we're doing in order to combat climate change is actually working. They said they've looked at the past 15 years of records, and they are saying that they are 95% certain the Earth's shield is growing back and healing back thanks to the worldwide reductions in emissions of chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs, which are substances that damage the ozone layer. They are also saying at some point at this rate, the ozone layer outside of Antarctica could completely close at some point within some of our lifetimes. Again, probably not my lifetime, probably not yours if you're listening to it, but probably some of the kids out there that were just born in the past 5-10 years. Maybe they would be helped by, National Weather Service, the NOAA. How about the post office? How about Amtrak? Because that's what Elon is aiming for next. Elon says he wants to prioritize Amtrak and the post office. We already know that they talked about with Louis DeJoy, the postmaster from the first Trump administration. He basically demolished and dismantled the post office to where there were so bad lag times on delivering packages. A lot of people just stopped mailing things or went to FedEx, all the other ones. So it actually hurt the U.S. Post Office a lot. Yep, definitely not. Finding and deporting illegal immigrants is not as hard. They're good hiders too. Let's just say that. And he lives in a fantasy and misinformation world. Yep. And Zelensky said that, lives in a disinformation. He does. I mean, we all know that. He's in his own world, and that's okay. That's okay. I mean, he was voted in. We, the people of this country have to stick with him for the next 4 years and hope that he does the best. But in terms of information that he provides and in terms of the information that he's being provided, a lot of times they're not always on the up and up. Well, not like he's ever always been on the up and up anyway, so we know that. Moving on, Health Department offers 80,000 federal workers a $25,000 buyout. As well, House Republicans, as mentioned earlier, unveiled a 6-month short-term spending bill ahead of the March 14th deadline here on Friday to avoid the partial government shutdown that I talked about earlier. Vote is expected tomorrow. The bill would head to the Senate for approval after that. All right, moving on into world news. I appreciate y'all as always being tuned in. Make sure you subscribe to Ball and Buds, BALLANDBUDS. There's a handy QR code up at the top. You can find our link tree to subscribe as well. Please make sure if you're watching, hit that like button. It is free and it helps us in the algorithm. I really appreciate your support. I am Omar, the Professor Fonseca, and you are watching the Professor Semanalmente as we get you out of here. In our last segment of the day, world news, we move into Ukraine, Russia, as we've kept you updated on this program. Russian forces retake much of the Russian border province of Kursk. So you'll remember this because I talked about this back in August when Ukraine actually did a surprise offensive and captured a lot of this part of the Russian province up in the northern hemisphere. Well, now that Ukraine has been cut off. Now, I don't think it's in direct relation to the cutoff of help that Donald Trump did for Ukraine last week. I'm pretty sure they would still have the same amount of weaponry and thus force, but obviously Russia caught them off guard to take back a lot of that province. And the problem with that is that was going to be a huge bargaining chip in order for peace talks. And now that they no longer have that, peace talks are to start this week, and Ukraine now again has less of a bargaining power than they did before. So again, European leaders are going to meet with U.S. diplomats this week, and they're going to meet with both the Ukrainian side and the Russian side with Vladimir Putin. And so then they're hoping to get a ceasefire deal here soon. So we'll see if that happens. Also, this week, U.S. diplomats are in line to meet with the Hamas. What did you say, Omar? Did I hear you correctly? Yes, you heard me correctly. U.S. diplomats are to meet with the terrorist group Hamas in order to try to broker a ceasefire deal on the Gaza Strip with Israel. As you will remember, we updated you last week. The ceasefire's first 42-day phase ended last Saturday. 33 Israelis, 2,000 Palestinians were exchanged. And so we will see how this goes forward. Right now, there is a holdup until the U.S. meets with Hamas on those talks. Moving back real quick to Ukraine, Russia, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has mentioned that the minerals deal that they were expecting to sign last week, obviously, is now on hold due to the kerfuffle or the Oval Office obstruction, as I have named it, that happened last week when there was the huge blow up between President Donald Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. So we'll see what's going to happen, but that deal is on hold. The deal, if given security guarantees, which is why the whole blow up happened and why I don't understand why we don't at least give them that if they were trying to, I was about to use a very bad word that I will probably get canceled for, as we are trying to extort them for 50% of their minerals, as I've talked about on this program, is way too much. 25% is a logical demand for us for repayment of what we gave them for the war, which they do need to repay some of it. But to ask for 50%, that would completely destroy the country as a whole and their economy, and that's just not right. But we do need to get something because we're completely dependent on China for our minerals. As China controls roughly 75% of the global supply of minerals, and we need to stop depending on them. So we do need this mineral deal in the United States as well, but we have to give them security guarantees or it makes no sense for them to sign that deal. So we'll keep you updated there. In Syria, so moving on, we talked about the Israeli-Hamas war there in the Gaza Strip. Well, now we are having even another war in Syria. You'll remember a couple years ago, last year in particular, I did a story where we talked about the Syrian president Bashar al-Assad, who escaped Syrian rebels and fled to Moscow, where he still remains under the protection of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Well, there were 1,000. The death toll in violent clashes in Syria rose to more than 1,000 over the weekend. What is happening? Fighting began Thursday along the country's western coast between state security forces and Assad loyalists, with the majority of victims appearing to be civilians targeted in revenge killings by the government, which is horrible because they were the same government that said they were going to stop doing that when they took the country over, and then they went out and killed a bunch of Assad's former people. Maybe that'll be the end of it, but again, as I mentioned when I first talked about this story, you can't take any terrorist group at their word because they're usually going to be lying to you. The group obviously only makes up 10% of the population. A lot have left since the new regime took over from Assad. And again, the new leadership pledged not to have retaliatory violence, but the independent watchdogs estimate 700 Alawite citizens or Assad followers have been killed since he fled to Moscow. So we'll see what happens there. As always, we will keep you updated on this program because I like to be as positive as possible and give y'all positive notes to end on here. Let me give you a couple positive stories in the world for you to end on. First of all, the security researchers have uncovered a backdoor in a Chinese-made ESP32 microchip. So shout out to security researchers for uncovering this. This Chinese-made microchip is in 1 billion devices worldwide and contains previously undocumented commands that can be used for cyber attacks. So shout out to those researchers, security researchers, for stopping many potential cyber attacks all over the world. That is great news. And then finally, DNA sequencing can provide quicker recovery from illness. So doctors in the United Kingdom have successfully trialed a system that reads a bacterial infection's genetic code and identifies the best antibiotic to provide for that infection within 48 hours, according to The Guardian. That is awesome. Nowadays, hospital labs can take up to 7 days to figure out bacterial infections. Some can take up to weeks. This new DNA sequencing will allow them to figure out the best antibiotic within 48 hours. That is awesome. And that's why we love science and the progress of medical technology and things in this world. And for doctors to start prescribing more broad spectrum antibiotics that will be able to cure diseases. But we also need to realize that as that happens, these bacteria, these viruses, they become resistant to these sort of things. So even if we're making antibiotics, which may be winning now, the bacteria, the illness usually fights back and finds a way around it, as you saw with COVID and the many shots and all that. So we're going to keep having to come up with more treatment in the future to continue beating these potential superbugs that could infect our whole world and could take out a lot of our, human population around the world.
Subscribe on YouTube at Ball and Buds.